Thank you. Thank you, Rick. And thank you again to all of our speakers for this session, Kevin Ahern, John Bell, Kevin Ferland, Dargan Frierson, and Rick. So we have about 5 minutes for questions, and I'm afraid I'm going to use the moderator's prerogative here. This conference as a whole, I'm pretty proud of the fact that we have a decent amount of diversity in the conference, but it just so happens that this panel is all like, 5 white guys talking about parodies. So we don't want to give people the wrong idea. I was wondering if some of you could just maybe mention your favorite parodists who are perhaps female, for example. Someone other than a cisgender white male whom you admire as a songwriter, a writer of science songs.
I'll jump in on that one. I had a student named Tari Tan who was very fond of my songs, and she was one of my TAs. And she took it so strongly and internally that she wrote 3 or 4 phenomenal parodies using the sort of principles that I had talked about. To be honest, I think hers were better than any of the songs that I had written. And in fact, she got them published in Bambit. So it's not just a white male endeavor.
I have a comment about that. I mean, one thing about parodies, especially if you're going to perform it yourself, is generally it tends to be male gender, although I congratulate Rick on his Adele impression there. I have also, one of the parodies on the website I showed you is a Beyonce song, which I screeched through an attempt at it on my webpage, but I'm going to need to hire someone more like Beyonce to sing that one.
I'm going to vote for Linda Williams. She does a lot of her own work, but she does do a few parodies now and again, and I really like her a lot. I think she's great.
Yeah, mine would be former PhD student in our department, Elizabeth Maroon. She did some fantastic songs for our winter party. Like almost every year is the showstopper number, like ITCZ, which stands for the Intertropical Convergence Zone, to the tune of YMCA, and we did the whole dance, ITCZ, and Bad Forecast to the tune of Bad Romance by Lady Gaga, many, many others too.
I'm blanking on the name. One of my favorite, it's really about science, but it's the Lady Gaga Bad Project video.
Yeah, totally.
That's one of my very favorite musical parodies ever, and that's about the process of doing science, but that's a great one.
Just while we're waiting for the next question, I remembered the thing I was trying to think of earlier, which is I've had a lot of fun lately with the new version of GarageBand, making recordings with that. It's pretty fantastic with having like software drummers that sound good, and then ways where you can just type in the chord progression of the song and it auto plays instruments for you as well. So it's a way that even non-musicians can do some basic recordings of their songs. So I'd highly recommend y'all check that out. I use the version on my iPad.
Time for a final question, if there is one. I'm wondering if any of the parodists who spoke before Rick are tempted to annotate in the way that Rick was talking about.
Well, I agree with his comment about it's a similar, if you will, poor man's version of the video idea, and you could produce something you could post on YouTube just via that, using that for graphics pretty simply.
I like to use the songs as a kind of a springboard with the hope that the student will, this is working in the affective domain, which we talked about during the first panel discussion this morning, that it'll build the fire so they'll be interested in continuing the research. But when in the songbook, for example, I'll put an introductory paragraph, for example, on the stars that guide you. It's about the North Star, and I wrote it with the idea in mind, he'd do it to the tune of Waltzing Matilda. And the irony is that the song invoked the star invoked in the song cannot be seen from the latitudes of the Southern Hemisphere as in Australia. So I just like to give them a little bit of notations. I've included Follow the Drinking Gourd in the song book as well, and that's a great old spiritual. But of course, I like to say that some of the work, some of the legend of the song and some of the lyrics were added after the antebellum South. And after the U.S. Civil War, the war between the states. So I try to provide a little backstory if I'm putting it in print form.
Mm-hmm. So a few questions about annotation that came in. I think that having students do their own annotations of songs is actually a great idea. I was thinking about that as I was hearing some of these other talks. So I think that's a great idea. Yeah, and there's not, in terms of the pedagogical advantage of having the arrows there, I mean, I could make something up, but the reason is so I don't forget, right? I get like excited about my singing, and then I realize, oh, I was supposed to put in a million arrows as I was going through here. If there's the arrows, I just know I get to that line, I just push the arrow. It's Pavlovian at this point, and that works better for me.
Ring that bell.
Ring the bell, says John Bell. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, I think we're about out of time for this session. Of course, you're all welcome to follow up with panelists via email, etc. So